carried a sense of normalcy as 27-year-old Avis Banks drove home through the quiet streets of Ridgeland, Mississippi. Her hand occasionally drifted to her growing belly, 5 months pregnant with the child she had dreamed of for so long. The engagement ring on her finger caught the fading sunlight as she turned into her neighborhood, thoughts likely filled with wedding plans and nursery colors. What Avis couldn't know was that someone had been watching her home, studying her routine, waiting for this exact moment. As her car approached the driveway of the house she shared with her fiancé Keon Pittman, the garage door hummed open, revealing the ordinary space that would soon become anything but. The neighborhood remained peaceful as darkness fell. Neighbors went about their evening routines, unaware that just yards away, a meticulous plan was being set into motion. Inside Avis's home, the sound of her footsteps echoed through the rooms as she moved through her evening routine, completely unaware that someone else was present, waiting with deadly intent. The garage, with its concrete floor and familiar surroundings, would become the final place Avis Banks would ever stand. The life she had carefully built, the future she had lovingly planned, and the child she had never met were all about to be violently stolen in an act of calculated rage and jealousy. Hours later, Keon Pittman's frantic voice broke through the emergency dispatcher's routine evening. "My fiancée, she's not moving. There's blood everywhere." The 911 call from November 29, 2006, would launch one of Mississippi's most disturbing murder investigations. First responders rushed to the scene only to discover a horrific tableau. Avis Banks lay in a pool of crimson on the garage floor, her body bearing the violence of multiple gunshot wounds and savage stab injuries. The brutality suggested not just murder, but rage, a personal, intimate hatred directed at both Avis and the unborn child she carried. The home appeared ransacked, initially pointing to a robbery gone wrong. But detectives quickly sensed something didn't add up. The precision of certain aspects of the crime scene, the targeted nature of the wounds, and the absence of valuable items painted a different picture, one of premeditation and purpose rather than random violence. Have you ever wondered what drives someone to commit such a calculated act of violence against a pregnant woman? As we uncover the twisted web of jealousy and obsession behind Avis Banks' murder, ask yourself, would you recognize these warning signs in your own life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. At the center of this tragedy stood three individuals whose lives had become fatally intertwined. Avis Banks, beloved daughter, dedicated daycare worker, expectant mother, and bride-to-be, whose only crime was loving a man who couldn't remain faithful. Keon Pittman, the grieving fiancé who discovered her body, yet harbored secrets that would soon come to light. And Carla Hughes, a respected language arts teacher whose professional demeanor masked a dangerous obsession. The investigation would reveal a classic triangle of love, betrayal, and deadly jealousy. While Avis prepared for motherhood and marriage, Keon had begun a secret affair with his colleague Carla during the summer of 2006. What began as casual encounters evolved into something far more dangerous as Carla's attachment deepened beyond reason. As detectives peeled back the layers of deception, they uncovered a trail of evidence pointing to a woman who had convinced herself that eliminating her rival was the only path to claiming the life she coveted. The murder weapons, a borrowed knife and .38 caliber revolver, would become the crucial links connecting Carla Hughes to the crime scene. This case would shock the community of Ridgeland and raise disturbing questions about how well we truly know the people in our lives, even those we trust to educate our children. Born on August 18, 1979, in Vicksburg, Mississippi, Avis Marie Banks grew up in a close-knit family that valued education, faith, and community. The daughter of Frederick and Deborah Banks, Avis shared a special bond with her two sisters, LaTanya and Efardrina, forming a tight family unit that would remain her foundation throughout her life. From an early age, Avis displayed a natural warmth and patience that drew others to her. Her childhood friends and teachers described her as thoughtful and determined, qualities that would later serve her well in her chosen career path. At Warren Central High School, where she graduated in 1997, Avis was known for a friendly demeanor and academic dedication. After high school, Avis pursued higher education at Alcorn State University, earning her degree in 2001. Throughout her educational journey, She remained an active member of Locust Grove MB Church, where her faith deepened and her connection to community service was nurtured. Following her graduation from Alcorn State, Avis found her calling working with children at Bright Horizon Daycare in Jackson, Mississippi. Colleagues noted her exceptional ability to connect with the youngest and most challenging children, often succeeding where others had struggled. Parents frequently requested her by name, trusting her with their most precious treasures. Beyond her daily work, Avis harbored dreams of eventually opening her own childcare center, one that would emphasize early education and character development. She kept a journal filled with ideas for curriculum and activities, revealing a woman who thought deeply about shaping young minds. In quiet moments, she shared with close friends her vision of creating a nurturing space where children from all backgrounds could thrive. Her professional aspirations aligned perfectly with her personal values of nurturing and community building. The same patience and compassion that made her excellent with children extended to her relationships with adults, making her a trusted confidant and friend to many in her community. Avis met Keon Pittman through mutual friends at a community gathering in 2004. Their connection was immediate. Keon was charmed by her genuine laugh and thoughtful nature, while Avis appreciated his ambition and charisma. After several months of dating, they moved in together, creating a home that friends described as warm and welcoming. Their relationship appeared solid from the outside. Keon worked at Chastain Middle School in Jackson, while Avis continued her work with children at the daycare. They supported each other's career goals and seemed to complement one another perfectly. Her steady, nurturing presence balancing his more outgoing personality. Like any couple, they faced challenges. Friends occasionally noticed Keon's wandering eye at social gatherings, but Avis either didn't notice or chose to focus on the positive aspects of their relationship. Her family later admitted they had concerns about Keon's commitment, but kept these worries to themselves, not wanting to interfere in her happiness. Despite any underlying issues, Avis remained devoted to building a future with Keon. She spoke of him with pride and affection, defending him when others raised doubts. In her journal entries from this period, she expressed gratitude for finding a partner who shared her dream of creating a family. A dream that seemed to be coming true when she discovered she was pregnant in mid-2006. The news of her pregnancy in June 2006 transformed Avis's world. Friends recalled how she glowed when sharing the news, already referring to her unborn child by nickname and making plans for the nursery. Shortly after confirming the pregnancy, Keon proposed, placing a diamond ring on her finger during a small gathering with family. As her pregnancy progressed to 5 months, Avis balanced wedding planning with preparing for motherhood. She had already begun collecting children's books and tiny clothes, storing them carefully in what would become the baby's room. The wedding was scheduled for spring 2007, after their child's birth, allowing Avis to fully enjoy both milestone events. In the summer of 2006, as Avis celebrated her pregnancy, a new teacher joined the faculty at Chastain Middle School in Jackson. Carla Hughes, 26, arrived with impressive credentials, a language arts teacher with a reputation for academic excellence and involvement in student activities. Colleagues described her as poised, articulate, and ambitious. Keon Pittman, working in the same school, quickly took notice of the attractive new colleague. Their initial interactions were professional, conversations in the teacher's lounge, committee meetings, and school events. To others, nothing seemed unusual about their collegial relationship. What no one realized was the immediate attraction simmering beneath the surface. Carla, single and new to the area, found herself drawn to Keon's confidence and charm. Keon, despite his pregnant fiancée waiting at home, began finding reasons to spend time with Carla. Their conversations grew longer, their lunch breaks synchronized, and a dangerous connection formed, all while Avis prepared for what she believed would be their future together. By August 2006, barely a month after meeting, Keon and Carla crossed the line from colleagues to lovers. Their first intimate encounter occurred in her apartment after a faculty meeting ran late, an excuse Keon readily provided to Avis. What began as a one-time indiscretion quickly evolved into regular meetings, with Keon fabricating after-school commitments and weekend work obligations. The affair operated with calculated secrecy. They established rules: no public displays of affection at school, separate arrivals and departures from her apartment, and careful management of text messages and calls. Keon maintained his relationship with Avis, returning home to his pregnant fiancée after spending hours with Carla, compartmentalizing his dual life with remarkable ease. Court testimony would later reveal the extent of their relationship. Weekend trips disguised as professional development opportunities. Intimate dinners in restaurants far from their usual social circles. Late-night encounters in Carla's apartment, where Keon would speak disparagingly about Avis and his reluctance to become a father. Most damning was Keon's admission that he never intended to leave Avis for Carla. In his own words during the trial, "It was just physical. I never promised her anything permanent." This casual attitude toward the relationship would prove catastrophic, as Carla Hughes had developed very different expectations about their future together. What began as mutual attraction transformed into dangerous obsession as Carla Hughes invested emotionally in a relationship that Keon viewed as merely physical. Friends of Carla noticed alarming changes in her behavior and priorities during the fall of 2006. She began canceling long-standing plans when Keon was available. Her conversation increasingly centered on him, and her phone rarely left her sight. Psychological experts who later analyzed the case identified classic patterns of obsessive attachment. Carla began introducing Keon to friends as her future husband, despite his ongoing engagement to Avis. She created elaborate fantasies about their life together, even researching homes and neighborhoods where they might live. Her apartment gradually accumulated items that mirrored Keon's preferences, books he mentioned, foods he enjoyed, even cologne for him to wear when visiting. Most concerning was her fixation on Avis's pregnancy. Carla repeatedly questioned Keon about Avis's prenatal appointments and nursery preparations. She began driving past the couple's home, sometimes parking nearby to observe their comings and goings. In her journal, investigators would later find detailed notes about Avis's schedule and routine, information that went far beyond casual interest. This escalating behavior reflected a psychological state where Carla no longer saw Avis as a person, but as an obstacle to be removed from the life she believed should be hers. Weeks preceding the murder revealed escalating warning signs that went tragically unrecognized. Carla's colleagues noticed her increasing agitation and preoccupation. She began making thinly veiled comments about home wreckers and women who trap men with pregnancies during lunch conversations. Her teaching performance declined as her focus shifted to monitoring Keon's whereabouts. Most alarming was her confrontation with Keon in early November when he canceled plans to attend Avis's prenatal appointment. Witnesses in the school parking lot observed Carla shouting, "You can't keep living this double life," before Keon calmed her and moved the conversation to a private location. Days before the murder, Carla approached her cousin with an unusual request to borrow his hunting knife and .38 caliber revolver, claiming she felt unsafe in her apartment. This same cousin would later provide crucial testimony, linking these weapons to the crime. Meanwhile, Avis remained completely unaware of the dangerous situation developing around her, never informed of the affair or the woman who had become fixated on claiming her life. November 29, 2006 began as an ordinary Wednesday. Avis Banks, now 5 months pregnant, left for work at Bright Horizon Daycare shortly after 7 in the morning. Security footage from the daycare showed her arriving, smiling as she greeted the children. Colleagues later recalled her excitement about an upcoming doctor's appointment where she hoped to learn her baby's gender. Meanwhile, Carla Hughes called in sick to Chastain Middle School, her first absence of the school year. Cell phone records would later place her near a shopping center that morning, where surveillance cameras captured her purchasing dark clothing and gloves. By mid-afternoon, her phone pinged towers near Avis in Keon's neighborhood, suggesting she was monitoring the house. Avis left work at her usual time, stopping briefly at a grocery store where receipts show she purchased ingredients for dinner. Text messages to Keon indicated she expected him home around 7 that evening. She arrived at their Ridgeland home shortly after 5:30, pulling into the garage as she typically did. What happened in the next 30 minutes would forever alter the lives of everyone connected to her. Neighbors reported hearing what they thought were firecrackers around 6 o'clock, but dismissed the sounds. By the time Keon Pittman arrived home shortly after 7, Avis Banks had been dead for nearly an hour. The garage where Keon discovered Avis's body told a story of calculated violence. Investigators documented the scene meticulously, noting that Avis still wore her work clothes and had her purse slung over her shoulder, suggesting she was attacked immediately upon entering the garage. Her keys had fallen near the interior door, indicating she had been preparing to enter the house when confronted. The physical evidence painted a horrific picture of her final moments. Avis had been shot 4 times, in the leg, chest, and twice in the head, with a .38 caliber revolver. The leg wound appeared to be the first, likely bringing her to the ground. As she lay wounded, the attacker had stabbed her multiple times in the face and neck with such force that the knife had left marks on the concrete beneath her body. The medical examiner would later determine that both the gunshot wounds and the stab wounds could have been independently fatal. Most disturbing to investigators was the evidence suggesting personal rage. The wounds to Avis's face appeared targeted to disfigure, while multiple stab wounds concentrated in her abdomen seemed deliberately aimed at her unborn child. Blood spatter analysis indicated the attacker had stood over Avis, continuing to inflict wounds well after she had fallen. The house beyond the garage showed signs of a staged burglary. Drawers had been pulled open, but their contents remained largely undisturbed. Valuable electronics and jewelry remained in plain sight, contradicting the robbery narrative. A single shoe print on a glass door would later become crucial evidence, its distinctive tread pattern matching a pair of shoes found in Carla Hughes' closet. First responders arrived within minutes of Keon's 911 call. At 7:12 p.m. Paramedics confirmed Avis was beyond medical help, while police secured the scene and began their investigation. Keon Pittman, visibly distraught, underwent initial questioning in a patrol car outside the home. Ridgeland Police Detective Ross Barnett took charge of the investigation, immediately recognizing the crime scene contradicted a typical home invasion. The staging was amateur, he would later testify. Whoever did this wanted us to think it was random, but the violence was deeply personal. The investigation team collected blood samples, shell casings, and the distinctive footprint. They photographed the staged burglary scene and noted the specific nature of the wounds. By midnight, they had begun canvassing neighbors, revealing the reports of sounds consistent with gunshots around 6 p.m. Initially, as with many domestic homicides, suspicion fell on Keon Pittman. He voluntarily provided DNA samples and allowed a gunshot residue test, which came back negative. His alibi, being at school until 6:30 p.m., was confirmed by security footage and colleague statements. The breakthrough came during Keon's extended interview when detectives asked about his relationships. After hours of questioning, he reluctantly revealed his affair with Carla Hughes, opening a new avenue of investigation that would quickly become the primary focus. Could you recognize the warning signs of a potentially dangerous relationship triangle? Have you ever witnessed obsessive behavior that made you uncomfortable? As we continue exploring this tragic case, I want you to consider, what would you do if you suspected someone close to you was being stalked? Share your thoughts below. The murder of a pregnant teacher shocked the Ridgeland community, generating intense media coverage and public outrage. Candlelight vigils drew hundreds of mourners to Locust Grove Church, where Avis had been an active member. Her students' parents organized a memorial fund for the daycare center. When details of the affair emerged, public sentiment intensified. The betrayal by 2 educators, people entrusted with children's well-being, particularly disturbed the community. Local schools held special counseling sessions for students struggling to understand how their teachers could be involved in such a tragedy. The case sparked community discussions about relationship violence and the hidden dangers of obsession, with domestic violence organizations reporting increased calls for information and support in the weeks following the murder. In the immediate aftermath of discovering Avis Banks' body, Keon Pittman became the investigation's natural focus. Statistics and experience guided detectives. When pregnant women are murdered, their partners are frequently responsible. Keon's emotional state during initial questioning raised flags for experienced investigators. While visibly upset, Detective Barnett noted his distress seemed performative at times, with Keon appearing to monitor officers' reactions to his grief. The discovery that Keon was the sole beneficiary of a recently purchased life insurance policy on Avis further heightened suspicion. The policy, taken out just 3 months earlier, carried a substantial payout of $200,000. Additionally, text messages retrieved from Avis's phone revealed recent tensions about wedding planning and Keon's apparent reluctance to finalize details. For the first 48 hours, investigators built a circumstantial case against Keon. They scrutinized his movements, interviewed his colleagues, and examined his financial records. However, his verifiable alibi and lack of physical evidence linking him to the actual murder forced detectives to consider alternative scenarios. The investigation's turning point came during Keon's third interview on December 1, 2006. After hours of questioning about inconsistencies in his statements, Detective Sarah Lindsay employed a different approach, asking directly about his relationships outside his engagement to Avis. Under mounting pressure, Keon finally admitted to his months-long affair with Carla Hughes, a fellow teacher at Chastain Middle School. This revelation immediately redirected the investigation. Keon described Carla as becoming increasingly possessive, mentioning an incident where she had threatened to tell Avis about their relationship. He revealed that Carla knew intimate details about his home life, including the layout of the house and Avis's schedule. When detectives asked if he believed Carla could be involved in Avis's murder, Keon's response proved telling. "I don't think she would do something like that, but she did say once that she wished Avis wasn't in the picture." This statement, recorded in the interview transcript, became a crucial element in establishing motive as the investigation progressed. With Carla Hughes now the primary person of interest, investigators methodically built their case through forensic evidence and witness testimony. The breakthrough came when crime scene technicians matched the distinctive footprint found on the glass door to a pair of 9 West shoes recovered during a search of Carla's apartment. Microscopic analysis confirmed not only the tread pattern but also traces of the same soil composition found in the victim's yard. Cell phone records provided damning evidence of Carla's movements on the day of the murder. Her phone pinged towers near Avis and Keon's neighborhood at 5:15 p.m., just before Avis arrived home, and again at 6:30 p.m., shortly after neighbors reported hearing gunshots. This contradicted her initial statement that she had been home sick all day. The murder weapons became the investigation's most compelling evidence. Carla's cousin, Marcus Hughes, came forward after seeing news reports about the case. He testified that Carla had borrowed his .38 caliber revolver and hunting knife the weekend before the murder, claiming she felt unsafe in her apartment. When she returned the gun days after the murder, he noticed it had been fired and completely cleaned. Ballistics experts later confirmed that bullets recovered from Avis's body match test rounds fired from this same weapon. Surveillance footage from various locations created a timeline of Carla's activities on the day of the murder. Cameras captured her purchasing dark clothing and gloves that morning, withdrawing cash from an ATM near the victim's neighborhood in the afternoon, and disposing of a bag in a dumpster behind a shopping center that evening. Though the bag was never recovered, the cumulative evidence painted a picture of premeditation and careful planning. Detectives first interviewed Carla Hughes on December 3, 2006, presenting their approach as a routine follow-up with Keon's colleagues. Her demeanor during this initial conversation struck investigators as unusually composed. While expressing appropriate shock about Avis's murder, she showed no reaction when detectives mentioned her relationship with Keon, simply stating they were friends who occasionally socialized outside work. When confronted with phone records showing extensive communication with Keon, Carla's story evolved. She admitted to the affair but insisted it had ended weeks before the murder. This contradicted evidence of their meeting just 2 days prior. As questioning intensified in subsequent interviews, detectives noted increasing inconsistencies in her timeline and explanations. Most revealing was her final interview before arrest, when detectives showed her the footprint evidence. According to the interrogation transcript, Carla became visibly agitated, demanding a lawyer after previously waiving her rights. Detective Barnett later testified that as she left the interview room, Carla muttered, "You can't prove I was wearing those shoes that day," a statement not prompted by any specific accusation from investigators. The trial of Carla Hughes began on October 5, 2009. Nearly 3 years after Avis Banks' murder, Madison County District Attorney Michael Guest opened with a powerful statement. This case is about a woman who decided that another woman's life, and the life of her unborn child, were obstacles to be eliminated. The prosecution methodically presented their case over 7 days, building a narrative of obsession, premeditation, and calculated violence. Forensic evidence formed the backbone of the state's case. Ballistics expert Dr. William Marvin testified that the bullets recovered from Avis's body matched the .38 caliber revolver borrowed from Carla's cousin. DNA analysis confirmed Avis's blood on the knife returned to the same cousin. The distinctive shoe print matched Carla's 9 West shoes not just in pattern, but in specific, wear marks unique to her pair. Cell phone records placed Carla near the crime scene at crucial times, contradicting her alibi of being homesick. Surveillance footage showed her purchasing items consistent with the crime: dark clothing, gloves, and cleaning supplies, hours before the murder. Bank records revealed a cash withdrawal near the victim's neighborhood, suggesting an attempt to avoid creating an electronic trail. Perhaps most damaging was evidence of premeditation. Prosecutors presented Carla's internet search history showing queries for undetectable poisons, how to make a death look accidental, and Mississippi penalties for manslaughter in the weeks before the murder. This digital trail, combined with the physical evidence, painted a picture of careful planning rather than a crime of passion. Defense attorney Johnny Walls pursued a 3-pronged strategy, attacking the physical evidence, suggesting alternative suspects, and portraying Carla as a respected educator incapable of violence. Walls repeatedly emphasized the lack of eyewitnesses and direct evidence, placing Carla inside the home. The defense vigorously challenged the forensic evidence, bringing in their own experts who questioned the shoe print analysis and suggested the blood evidence may have been contaminated during collection. They highlighted that no DNA or fingerprints belonging to Carla were found at the crime scene. Most aggressively, the defense pointed to Keon Pittman as the more likely culprit. They characterized him as a manipulative womanizer who benefited financially from Avis's death through the life insurance policy. Wall suggested Keon had orchestrated the murder and framed Carla, using their affair as convenient misdirection for investigators. Throughout the trial, the defense surrounded Carla with character witnesses, fellow educators, former students, and community members who testified to her gentle nature and dedication to teaching, creating a stark contrast to the prosecution's portrayal of a calculating killer. Keon Pittman's testimony created the trial's most dramatic moments. Over 6 hours on the stand, he admitted to the affair while denying any involvement in Avis's murder. Under cross-examination, he acknowledged lying repeatedly to investigators in initial interviews and concealing the relationship from Avis's family after her death. His testimony visibly divided the courtroom, with some jurors appearing skeptical of his convenient narrative. Marcus Hughes, Carla's cousin, provided crucial testimony about the murder weapons. He recounted how Carla had specifically requested to borrow his .38 caliber revolver and hunting knife the weekend before the murder. His voice broke as he described the moment he realized the weapons he provided might have been used to kill a pregnant woman. Former student Jasmine Williams delivered unexpected testimony about conversations with Carla in the weeks before the murder. Williams recalled Carla confiding that she was in love with a man who couldn't be with her because of his pregnant girlfriend, and stating that sometimes obstacles need to be removed. This testimony significantly strengthened the prosecution's case for premeditation. After 12 days of testimony, the case went to the jury on October 17, 2009. The 9 women and 3 men deliberated for just 4 hours before reaching their verdict. Court observers noted the unusually short deliberation time for such a complex case, suggesting the evidence had been particularly convincing. When the jury foreman announced guilty on 2 counts of capital murder, one for Avis and one for her unborn child, Carla Hughes collapsed in tears. The same jury reconvened the following day for the penalty phase, ultimately sparing her from the death penalty, but ensuring she would receive life imprisonment without possibility of parole. On October 19, 2009, Judge William Chapman delivered the final judgment in the case that had captivated Mississippi for nearly 3 years. The courtroom fell silent as Carla Hughes, once a respected educator, stood to receive her sentence. The jury, having found you guilty of 2 counts of capital murder and having declined to impose the death penalty, this court sentences you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for each count, to be served consecutively, Judge Chapman declared. The sentencing hearing included powerful victim impact statements from Avis's family. Her mother, Deborah Banks, addressed the court while holding a small pair of baby shoes intended for her grandchild. "You didn't just take my daughter," she said, looking directly at Carla. "You took our future, our legacy, and a child who never had the chance to draw a breath." The judge noted that Mississippi's recognition of the unborn child as a separate victim made this case particularly significant in state legal precedent. The ripple effects of Avis Banks' murder extended far beyond the courtroom. For the Banks family, the loss created a void that could never be filled. Frederick and Deborah Banks established a scholarship in their daughter's name at Alcorn State University, specifically for students pursuing careers in early childhood education. "We wanted something positive to come from this tragedy," Frederick explained in a 2011 interview. Avis believed in education as a path forward. Avis's sisters, LaTanya and Efardrina, became advocates for domestic violence awareness, speaking at community events about recognizing warning signs in relationships. They established an annual community workshop called Avis's Angels that provides resources for women in potentially dangerous situations. Their efforts have been credited with helping dozens of women recognize and escape toxic relationships. For Carla Hughes' family, the aftermath brought a different kind of pain. Her parents, who had testified to her character during the trial, faced ostracism in their community. Carl Hughes, who had adopted Carla as an infant, lost his position as a school administrator due to the negative association. In a rare interview given in 2012, he expressed continuing belief in his daughter's innocence, while acknowledging the devastating impact on the Banks family. Keon Pittman, whose actions had set the tragedy in motion, moved away from Mississippi shortly after the trial. According to former colleagues, he changed careers and has maintained a low profile. The Banks family has stated publicly that while they don't hold him legally responsible for Avis's death, his betrayal contributed to the circumstances that led to their loss. As of 2025, Carla Hughes remains incarcerated at the Central Mississippi Correctional Facility in Pearl, Mississippi. Now in her mid-40s, she has exhausted all direct appeals of her conviction. Her final appeal to the Mississippi Supreme Court was denied in 2015, with the justices unanimously upholding the original verdict and sentence. According to correctional records, Hughes has maintained a disciplinary-free record during her incarceration. She has completed several educational programs and reportedly works as a tutor in the prison's GED program. Former inmates have described her as quiet and isolated, rarely discussing her case with others. In a 2022 documentary about the case, Hughes declined to be interviewed, but provided a written statement maintaining her innocence. Prison officials note that she receives few visitors aside from her parents, whose health has declined in recent years. Under Mississippi law, her sentence ensures she will remain incarcerated for the remainder of her natural life, with no possibility of parole for either of the 2 murder convictions. The tragedy of Avis Banks offers critical lessons about recognizing and responding to dangerous relationship dynamics. Mental health professionals point to this case as a textbook example of obsession escalating to violence when boundaries blur and warning signs go unaddressed. Dr. Elaine Montgomery, who studies intimate partner violence at the University of Mississippi, identifies several intervention points that might have altered the outcome. The colleagues who overheard arguments between Keon and Carla, the friends who noticed her increasing fixation, these were moments when intervention could have made a difference, she explains. We've learned that bystanders need both awareness and concrete action steps. This case has influenced how law enforcement approaches triangulated relationship violence. Detective training now includes specific protocols for identifying obsessive behavior patterns and assessing risk when affairs are discovered during investigations. Several police departments in Mississippi have implemented what they informally call the Avis Protocol, a checklist of warning signs that helps officers evaluate the potential for violence in complex relationship situations. Educational institutions have also evolved their policies, Many school districts now have explicit guidelines about reporting concerning behavior among colleagues, recognizing that professional environments can become dangerous when personal boundaries collapse. These systemic changes represent a societal commitment to learning from tragedy, ensuring that Avis's story serves as both warning and catalyst for prevention. The story of Avis Banks reminds us of the fragility of life and the devastating consequences when jealousy and obsession override humanity. In the quiet moments of reflection this case demands, we must acknowledge the ripple effects of betrayal that extended far beyond the immediate participants in this triangle. What makes this case particularly haunting is its ordinariness before the extraordinary violence. Workplace attractions, infidelity, and jealousy are common human experiences. Yet something in this particular constellation of personalities and circumstances produced an outcome of unimaginable brutality. Perhaps that's why this case continues to resonate years later. It forces us to examine the thin lines between love and possession, between desire and destruction. As we close this examination of a life cut short, we're left with questions about human nature that have no easy answers. What drives someone to eliminate another person rather than face rejection? How do we protect ourselves and others from dangers that may be invisible until it's too late? And how do we honor victims like Avis by creating meaningful change? If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Explosive True Crime Stories. Share your thoughts below on warning signs you've recognized in relationships. Your engagement helps spread awareness that could save lives. Remember, recognizing red flags early might prevent tomorrow's tragedy.